Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georgie Calvin-Smith. Tonight, Ghana's Prime Minister is inaugurated following unusual scenes of chaos in Parliament, scuffles breaking out between the ruling party and the opposition after an MP steals uncounted ballot papers during the election for Speaker. Also, Mali backs Paris in agreeing that a fatal French airstrike targeted jihadists and not a wedding party. People from the central Malian village of Bounti say that around 18 civilians were killed in Sunday's attack. And South Africa says it'll be bringing in 1.5 million vaccines for health workers by the end of the month as the continent struggles to kick off COVID-19 vaccination campaigns amidst fears that Africa's second wave is even more aggressive than its first. But first, Ghana's army was called in to calm things down after Parliament descended into disarray, with a lawmaker trying to run off with ballot papers and opposition and ruling party members clashing during the election of the Speaker. The unusual breakdown in the usually stable democracy doesn't bode well for the legislature, which is split down the middle. It'll be working with President Nana Akufo-Addo, who was sworn in for a second term on Thursday after narrowly winning re-election last month. Shirley Sitman has more.
Ghana's parliament is usually a symbol of cordial democratic debates. Thursday was an exception. MPs were in the process of electing their speaker, with the opposition's candidate expected to win the vote, when a lawmaker suddenly stole uncounted ballots. The picture shows him running out of the room, chased by other members of parliament. The chaos continued when soldiers entered the chamber trying to keep MPs apart. Lawmakers quickly escorted them out of the room, and the opposition called for an investigation into who called on the army to intervene. Order was restored, and Speaker Al Ben Bagbin was sworn in. The events in Parliament come after a month of rare political unrest. There are exactly as many MPs from the opposition and the ruling party, 137, which means policymaking will be complicated. Meanwhile, the opposition has challenged the results of the presidential vote, won by Nana Akufo-Addo. In his inauguration, the president vowed to work in unity with the new speaker.
I want to assure you of my wholehearted determination to work with you to advance the peace, progress, and prosperity of the Ghanaian people.
Ghana needs efficient governance to cope with the COVID crisis that has hit its economy. Growth is the lowest in 3 decades, and sovereign debt is over 70% of GDP.
Well, Mali's broken its silence in the controversy over a French airstrike in a remote part of the centre of the country that villagers say killed over 12 people at a wedding party, but the French military insists was a precision raid on jihadists. Bamako's supporting those claims. Malian Defence Ministry says that it'll be looking into why the accounts of what happened are so different. Anne-Fleur Lespio brings us more from Bamako.
4 days after the airstrike on the village of Bounti, the Malian authorities finally released a statement on Thursday. They speak of a joint operation between the Malian Armed Forces, France's anti-insurgent Operation Barkhane, and the G5 Sahel forces. According to the Malian army, a group of about 50 fighters belonging to the jihadist group of Katiba Serma was spotted on Sunday around 1 p.m. during a surveillance mission. Without specifying the village of Bounti, the statement mentions 3 groups of men located between the areas of Douenza and Ombori. According to army images, about 30 of them were neutralized by airstrikes conducted from a Mirage 2000 jet fighter. A group of villagers and armed men then recovered the wounded and proceeded to bury the dead around 5 p.m. These statements come in addition to those made by France at the beginning of the week. On Tuesday, the French army said it had neutralized a dozen jihadists identified in an intelligence operation in the Ombori area. Locals say civilians were targeted at a wedding. According to our sources, 18 people were killed and 8 wounded. All of them were men. The youngest victim is believed to have been 25 years old. Some of them were not from the village of Bounti, but from nearby communities. The UN MINUSMA mission has announced the opening of an investigation. In general, it's difficult to get reliable information in this remote area, which is largely controlled by jihadist groups.
Now, as the world continues to unpick the unprecedented scenes in US Congress on Wednesday, in which mobs of Trump-supporting extremists stormed the Capitol in a bid to overturn election results, some African observers are saying that Washington's democratic reputation has been deeply damaged. In Senegal, like elsewhere, there is surprise and concern that such an assault could happen in a nation usually held up as an example of functional governance.
What happened at the U.S. Capitol happens regularly in Africa. Presidents who seize power and refuse to recognize the victory of their opponents. America is often said to be the land of democracy, but there we see that their democracy is threatened.
The Republicans control everything. For years, they had not been in power, and now they don't want to leave power. In the past, the United States was a model of development and democracy, but now we can't say they are a model of democracy anymore.
Meanwhile, protests broke out in Senegal's capital overnight on Wednesday as frustration over a new coronavirus curfew erupted. Clashes in Dakar saw young people burning tyres and throwing up barricades in the streets as police tried to break up crowds using tear gas. A new 9 p.m. to 5 a.m. curfew has been brought in this week for Dakar and the nearby region of Thiès, there where 90% of the country's COVID-19 cases have been logged. Overall, Senegal has seen around 20,000 infections with at least 433 deaths. Many protesters say that they have to work at night and that the restrictions endanger their livelihoods. Now, South Africa says it's going to bring in 1.5 million doses of the AstraZeneca vaccine to use on its health workers. The country is facing record high coronavirus figures. Much of Africa is still ramping up efforts to get its hands on vaccines as richer regions race to stock up. Shirley Sitbin tells us more.
Outside of Africa, dozens of countries are racing to buy Pfizer, BioNTech, or Moderna vaccines. But across much of the continent, health authorities are going with British-made AstraZeneca, with China's Sinopharm, or Russian-made Sputnik V. They don't need to be kept in extremely cold temperatures, which can be challenging in rural areas. Plus, China, which has become increasingly influential across the continent, has vowed to deliver its vaccine to poorer countries. Its foreign minister has started an Africa tour in Nigeria. The UN COVAX scheme, which buys and delivers vaccines for 20% of the world's poorest populations, is also due to start, and governments are negotiating with labs. But the vaccines will only arrive in a few months' time. Critics say that's too long.
It gives a sense that there is no plan in place. Only now the minister is desperately trying to play catch-up.
The process in many African countries is likely to stretch up to 2 or 3 years. The goal is to vaccinate more than 60% of the population.
This is a question about herd immunity. If we can get more than 70% of the people vaccinated, we'll be in very good shape.
Meanwhile, the number of infections keeps rising. In South Africa, a new variant of the disease is even more infectious. Authorities there and in Zimbabwe have reimposed restrictions, hoping to slow down the pandemic.
While several soldiers and senior government officials have been killed in northwestern Cameroon after their convoy was ambushed by suspected Anglophone separatists. Attackers used a makeshift bomb in the raid. Regina Sondo has more.
Authorities in Cameroon's northwest region say a civilian and members of Cameroon's motorized infantry brigade were killed in a separatist attack Wednesday morning. The incident occurred around Jikwa in Momo Division, northwestern region of Cameroon. The civilian killed in the attack has been named Rebecca Jeme Iyabo. She was the divisional delegate for communication in Momo Division. Separatists as fighters reportedly used improvised explosive devices to ambush a convoy transporting soldiers and civilians. They attacked a convoy that previously transported divisional officers to their duty posts for installation. Now, these separatists seem to have changed their method of attack and are using guerrilla tactics. They have been hiding improvised explosive devices by the roadside and waiting for their targets to be hit in the bush. The 4-year conflict has killed about 4,000 people and displaced hundreds of thousands.
Regina Sondo there. Now, Ugandan opposition leader Bobi Wine asked the International Criminal Court to investigate President Yoweri Museveni and several senior officials for human rights abuses. Wine's lawyer filed a brief with the Hague Court on Thursday, accusing Museveni of encouraging widespread and sometimes fatal police brutality. The former singer will try to unseat Museveni in the January 14th vote. Wine and his supporters have been repeatedly and violently targeted by security services throughout the campaign. There are concerns that journalists are also being systematically attacked in the run-up to the vote. Human rights organisations say that levels of pre-electoral violence are unprecedented.
We have, since the nomination of candidates, registered over 100 cases of attacks on journalists, some being shot at, some having their gadgets destroyed, some having their vehicles damaged. And the president has severally come out to attack the media as working for foreign agents, as being a partisan. The voice of the president is so strong that it pushes the security forces to act immediately on the journalists.
That's FI in Africa. Thanks for watching.
Here at France 24, we're taking a broad outlook by talking about the women who are reshaping our world.
En France 24 en español no tenemos temas vedados. Y eso se puede ver en televisión y en todas las plataformas que tenemos en Internet.
في فرنسا 24 لا ننسى ونحجز لكم أسبوعيا تذكرة عودة للمدن والمناطق التي كانت في قلب الأحداث قبل أن تدخل في طي النسيان.
Claro que tiene algo especial, somos todos de distintos países y trabajamos con todo el corazón para entregar información en el momento preciso.
أخبار سياسية واقتصادية وثقافية وأيضا رياضية بأعين خبراء رياضيين. هذه هي قناة France 24.
Liberté, égalité, actualité.